Saints fans, welcome to the Bayou Blitz with Mr. Bob Rose and the crew. What's happening, Bob?
Not a lot, Kyle. Good evening to all NFL and all Saints fans. Welcome to the Bayou Blitz. Today we are going to, we moved our regular time from 8 o'clock Eastern time, 7 o'clock Central. We moved it back an hour. And you're looking to deal with us for the next 2 hours. It's draft eve, and we're having our draft day special, so I hope everybody's ready.
Yeah, it should be a good one, man. And we got Mr. Barry Hurstis in the queue for us, Bob.
I can't wait. Barry and I text pretty often, bounce thoughts and ideas off of each other. And anybody that's listened to this show or talked to me before, Barry actually got me started in this business. So he's sort of one of my mentors, as well as yourself, Mr. Mosley. So definitely looking forward to having Barry on. And then, folks, a little bit later, we have another big treat for you. Mike Detillier will be joining us for the final hour of our program. Looking forward to his input. Been a big fan of his for a long time, and there's nobody that puts out a better draft guide so NFL fans. He'll tell you how to get his draft guide into the future. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to Mike too.
Yeah, it should be a pretty good show, man. And welcome, Barry. How you doing?
Doing great, guys. How about you?
Good.
Well, I'm still kicking. A little 9-month-old boy has been into everything today, and frankly, guys, I'm exhausted. I'm hoping I don't sleep through this draft.
Yeah, well, look, man, I had a little difficulty myself. I literally just got back home a little while ago. Truck broke down, had to get a new ignition switch for the truck, so I almost didn't make this show tonight. But luckily, I'm back home. I'm actually in my office, brewing a pot of coffee and looking forward to talk about Saints NFL draft, man. Look, this football team has really knocked it out of the park the last 2 years, and it's one of the reasons why they went from 7-9 3 straight years to 11-5 division championship, and 10 seconds away from playing in the NFC championship game. So hopefully they can build upon that. I think they've had a solid free agency. Nothing spectacular, but just solid, sound moves that make sense, and just trying to continue trending upward and building upon what they've started. They've laid a really, they've basically a Super Bowl team that basically kind of got old a little bit long in the tooth and has really had to kind of remodel itself or kind of reinvent itself, so to speak. And I think they're really feel good about where they're at right now. And now it's just a matter of building upon that success.
Yeah, exactly, and they should feel good about what they've done. Not only proud of last year's accomplishments, but like you said, Barry, a Super Bowl team got a little bit old, a little bit fast, and the Saints' first strategy was to, as the saying goes, reload rather than rebuild, and they tried to do so with some failed free agency moves. But the last 2 years, this team has built themselves very well through the draft and through smart free agent spending. I love the strategy, the off-season strategy that this team has had the last couple of years.
Yeah, one thing I think you got to give them credit for is, and look, I'm more of an opinion editorial writer than I am a beat writer or an analyst, so to speak. So I've been very vocal, as you guys know. I've been very vocal in my criticism of the team in those down years, especially 2014 and 2015, when they just looked abominable. I mean, they were just horrible. And so, but give them credit, because one thing I've learned about the Saints organization is they handle criticism well, and they take it to heart. They don't just kind of shine it on. I know so many Cleveland Browns, perfect example, that just kind of, they shine it on and say, they're fans. They don't know what they're talking about. We're the experts. In the Saints case, I think that they actually, I'm not saying that they're actually would care what fans think if they're going to do what they want to do regardless. But they take it to heart. They take the criticism to heart from the media, from the fan, whoever. And give them credit. They've knocked it out the park this last year and a half, so or 2 years basically. So again, just give them a lot of credit. They've done a great job.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. Now, Barry, it's been a little while since you and I talked. At least over the phone like this. Have been curious to see what your thoughts are before we get into full-blown draft coverage. You kind of alluded to the moves that they made in the free agent market, and then they had a solid free agency. What's the free agent move, other than, of course, re-signing Mr. Breeze? What's the free agency move that you are most excited about?
I guess Demario Davis, just because I always think that, before free agent, after the season was over, as soon as the season was immediately over, and I think you and I probably discussed it privately, that I always thought the biggest thing they needed was a guy, a linebacker, an inside linebacker type of guy who could run sideline to sideline, and be a stuffer in the run game, and be at least adequate covering tight ends and running backs out the backfield. You're never going to get the perfect prototype. I guess maybe you could say, Reuben Foster or whatever. Apparently the Chargers are going to be dropped against him or something. The last thing I saw right before I came on the air. So, but not everybody has that kind of talent. So, Demario Davis, though, for a 29-year-old guy, this is a guy who's kind of I guess you could say a late bloomer, because his first few years in the league weren't that great, but the last few years, last year in particular with the Jets, he was phenomenal, and I just think it's a really, really under the radar signing. Pro Football Focus even rated him as the number one linebacker in free agency. That might have been a little bit overblown, but it certainly was the most underrated maybe defensive player in free agency. So that for me personally, that was my favorite signing, because he's fast. He's a playmaker. He's exactly what the defense needed. Now, if let's say Rashaan Evans drops to 27, would I be offended if the Saints took Rashaan Evans? No, because I feel like, you always hear that expression, you can't have too many good cornerbacks or you can't have too many good edge rushers. Well, I'd argue that you can't have too many good fast linebackers either. And for years, Saints linebackers were horrendous. They were getting just gutted right up the middle. And I can remember, I think it was 2015 season maybe, where they played Tennessee, and they got embarrassed. Outright embarrassed by Delaney Walker, because none of the Saints linebackers could cover Delaney Walker. So I always thought that was a weakness. And, if Alex Anzalone if he can stay healthy, I think that he's a steal. We talk about Kamara and all the guys that they got. Alex Anzalone could wind up being the steal of that class if the kid can stay on the field. He's a phenomenal player, but they knew when they took that chance on him that he was an injury-prone player at Florida. We talked about it last year at this time after they made the pick, that we loved the Anzalone pick, but we worried then, would he be able to stay on the field? True to form, rookie season, he was out, after the first few games. So we'll see if he can stay healthy. Look, if Anzalone stays healthy, and then you got Demario, you're throwing Davis into the mix, you got A.J. Klein, who I thought was solid, Robertson solid. And look, they still might draft a guy there, and maybe an inside guy, maybe a guy like a Gennard Avery from Memphis, who's I was just reading Mike Detilier's draft guide before he came on the air. Man, we'll get into it in a minute, but the talent in this draft is mainly from the top half of the second round all the way through to the end of the third. I can't ever remember a draft where the concentration of talent was actually, or should I say the best concentration of talent is from the top of round 2 probably to about the end of round 3. I mean, you got a guy like Anthony Miller going in the mid-second, or, as high as the mid-second, maybe as low as the third. Anthony Miller, who might be the best receiver in the draft, but because of concerns of his knee injury from last year, people are, he's way down the draft board because of his medical. This is a guy that some people are comparing to Antonio Brown. So imagine if you get a guy who some people think has the talent of Antonio Brown, and you're getting him, low second, early third. That's insane. So, I think even though the Saints only have 8 picks, they don't have a second round pick, I fully expect them to try to trade back into the second round. Matter of fact, in my last mock draft out yesterday, that's exactly what I have them doing. So we'll get into that later. But, yeah, man, look, I like what this team is doing, and I fully expect, if nothing else, that every single pick they'll make this weekend we'll be happy with.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And what you said, too, about so much talent in this draft in multiple positions being available from around, at least judging by projections, going by projections between the middle of the second round up through late third, early fourth. And Kyle, you and I talked about this a lot last week, not necessarily about specific players, but about the benefits of perhaps trading back or trading into the second round. And I think all three of us are in agreement. I would be shocked if the Saints did not come out of this weekend with at least one second-round pick. And like you, Barry, in my first mock draft about a month ago, I projected a trade. And it's so difficult to mock trades, we know that. But I projected them, making a trade to move into the second. And then tomorrow morning's mock draft that I'll be releasing, I'm teasing it a little bit, but I have them mock drafting 2 second-round picks. Yeah, well, I don't know if Saints fans will like how I did it, but I mean, we'll see. These mock drafts, they become almost exhausting this time of year, especially for you, Barry, and for you, Kyle. You guys have been doing this a lot longer than me. At this point, I'm mentally exhausted. I just want the draft to be here already.
Let me just say this to Saints fans listening, because I know this is a monotonous thing every single year. This time you hear the same stuff. But look, man, I can tell you, I got so many names in my head that my brain is just a jumbled mess at this time of the year, because from what I say, late July to early January, you're in season mode, and then as soon as the season's over, you pretty much kind of switch over, so to speak, to draft mode or to off season mode, and then you got the waves, so to speak, of free agency. So you got to go through that, and it's simultaneously while that's going on, then you got to start learning all these college kids. And look, I'm so immersed with watching the Saints day to day and keeping up with them day to day and trying to cover the season that I don't even watch college football. Literally, I mean, I might catch LSU game or whatever, or since I'm from Louisiana, of course, I'm always gonna, even though I live out of town, I'm going to always catch the LSU game regardless, but I rarely, quite honestly, don't even, I know who the good players are or whatever, but I really don't even watch, I don't look at film and get into, the meat and potatoes of these guys until February, for starting basically from the Senior Bowl on. So, by the time I get to this point, the day before the draft, my head is swimming. So, but I just want Saints fans to know look, I get up at 3:00 in the morning, a lot of mornings, and brew this pot of coffee right here in this office right here and cover these prospects. So trust me when I tell you, this is, for all of us, this is a passion. And when Mike Detillier gets on, we already know, his resume speaks for itself, and I can tell you that countless hours. I mean, Mike, he might sleep, 4.5, 5 hours a day, and he's on the road, looking at guys, talking to coaches, talking to, prospects, parents, and friends of friends. I mean, if you just look through his draft guide, it's unlike anybody else's draft guide, because he literally makes the he drives the miles in his car, or he'll get on a flight and fly somewhere and go watch a kid play. And that's money coming out of his pocket, to go watch these kids. You and I, we're doing it, long distance and kind of relying on the computer and relying on the analysis and stuff of other people. Mike Cotillier actually travels to these places and goes and looks at these guys up close and personal and meets them in person and goes to all these camps and all this. So, we just value his opinion so much. And, there's a lot of hours of preparation that goes into it. And Saints fans can take comfort in knowing that, we're trying to cover it from every single angle that we can.
Yeah, we really are. And guys, I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple recent moves that the Saints had made this week. Barry, you mentioned Anthony Miller, and I've said it multiple times, he's my favorite receiver in the draft, one of my favorite players in the draft. But staying on the receiver position, the Saints this week, for those that didn't know, they have re-signed Brandon Coleman, who they let test the unrestricted free agent waters, but they re-signed him, I believe, to a 1-year deal. But in the process, they have lost Willie Snead. Willie Snead signed a contract tender with the Baltimore Ravens for 2 years, and the Saints elected not to match it. So Willie Snead is no longer a New Orleans Saint. Now, we already know that the Saints acquired Cameron Meredith, a fine receiver from the Chicago Bears. In a similar situation, they offered him, he was a restricted free agent, they offered him a contract tender that the Bears did not match. So basically, you're looking at a swap, Willie Snead for Cameron Meredith. But the loss of Snead, let's ignore the 8 catches for 92 yards last year that we talked about all season long. Where's Willie Snead? If you look at the previous 2 years, and he averaged about just shy of 900 yards and around 70 receptions, and was a very key third down target for Drew Brees for 2 years there. What does the re-signing of Coleman and the signing of Cameron Meredith, what do you guys think that does to how the Saints have reprioritized the receiver position? How early do you expect them, if at all, to address a wideout in this draft?
Well, I'll take it first. I don't think it affects it at all. I mean, if you caught the ESPN mock draft last night, Mike Triplett of ESPN, Calvin Ridley of Alabama fell to the Saints at 27. And of course, it's a mock, and I seriously doubt that would actually happen. But let's just suppose it does. And the reason he did it was because Ridley was the best player available. And I can tell you, look, let me tell you something about the Saints' best player available strategy. Of all the teams in the NFL, that you always hear the term BPA, best player available, but the Saints organization, probably maybe more so than any team in the NFL, really, really stick to that philosophy. And maybe other than the Sheldon Rankins pick, where you kind of knew that was, I think everybody in the building knew that they were going to take Sheldon Rankins that year. But other than that, I don't think any other year in these last 4 or 5 drafts that you can say that the Saints were that they took a position of need. They literally just, 2015 when they took Andrews Pete. Did you think Andrews Pete was going to be the first pick that year? No, I certainly didn't. I don't think anybody in Saints media thought he was going to be the first. So that was definitely a situation where they took the best player available. So, in the case of Lattimore last year, as we know, if Patrick Mahomes, if Kansas City doesn't trade up to take Mahomes, then they're going to take Mahomes in that spot. So I can't stress enough. Saints fans hate when I say this, but I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it again. Do not be surprised if this team goes after quarterback. I'm not suggesting that they will. I'm not suggesting that they're going to go crazy and do some kind of blockbuster trade and trade up all the way to, into the top 5 and try to get one of those quarterbacks. I don't think it's going to happen. All I'm saying is never say never, because, again, and I know you always see it, well, Drew's going to play 2 more years and we'll worry about it then. Yeah, well, you can keep kicking that can down the road, brother, but sooner or later, that can you're going to step on that can and cut your foot. So, okay, so bottom line is at some point, and I'm sorry, please don't get me started on Taysom Hill. This Taysom Hill's like, I love Taysom Hill, phenomenal athlete, average quarterback. I don't care what anybody says. Go back and watch the film. Watch it closer. Great player. He's a playmaker, phenomenal athlete, like I said. But as far as quarterbacking skills, slightly above average. And I'm telling you, if you know what you're looking at, go back and watch the film of that. Like I said, he had hey, everybody, he had a great preseason for Green Bay. I don't want to knock him. I don't want to. And look, he might go out there and blow the doors off in the preseason and make me look stupid. Okay, and if he does, more power to him. Because I'll be the first one to come out and write an article praising Taysom Hill, believe me. But I just don't see this kid being the next, franchise quarterback. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. And God forbid if Breeze got hurt. So, Saints fans don't like hearing that. I know there's a lot of people out there hearing me talk right now that disagree with me. But you watch what I tell you. Again, they were going to take Mahomes last year. If there's a quarterback, if just whatever, if Kyle Lawletta, let's say, the kid from Richmond, is sitting there at 91 when they're picking at round 3, and they're picking in round 3, don't be surprised. That's all I'm going to tell you. So quarterback is in play. That's all I'm going to say. Well, they might not take one. They might not. But don't be shocked that they do.
Barry, you said a lot, and
hey, it is. Hey, look,
it is what it is. I'm not
the only one saying it. Nick Underhill of New Orleans Advocate, Larry Holder, New Orleans Times Picayune. It would be one thing if I was the only guy saying it. I'm not. So
yeah,
and because it's as plain as the hand right in front of your face. He's 39 years old, not 29. He's 39. And yeah, I get that he's playing at a high level for his age. Let's not even make the assumption that he's going to just fall off the cliff this year, okay? But I'm telling you, as a 50-year-old man myself, and you guys I think are all near the same age as me. Trust me, when it hits hard. And I don't care how good a shape Drew Brees is in. I don't care how great of an athlete he is. I don't care how great of a quarterback he is. When it hits him, it's going to hit him hard.
Right.
It hit Brett Favre hard. It hit Testaverde hard. It hit Warren Moon hard. Every great quarterback, at some point, when the physical wall that hits every man in his early 40s hits, it's going to hit hard. And so, bottom line is, I think he's still got another 2, maybe, if we're fortunate, if we're blessed, we'll get a third year. If not, but bottom line is, the Saints have to be prepared, because if the drop-off comes and they're not prepared, then you become the Denver Broncos, because we see what's going on in Denver. They rode Peyton Manning through that last year. God bless them. They had Von Miller. Between Peyton Manning and that phenomenal defense, they got a Super Bowl championship. And then Peyton rode off into the sunset, and now you're stuck with Paxton Lynch. So, look, man, you don't want to become the Denver Broncos. Yeah, you get the Super Bowl, but at what cost? Then you're stuck rebuilding your franchise for the next 5 years, and then Von Miller, you're wasting you got one Super Bowl out of Von Miller, but you're going to waste the prime of his career because you didn't have a quarterback ready to take over when Manning retired. And the Saints don't want to be the next Denver Broncos. So I'm telling you, and Sean Payton knows it. That's why he was going to take Mahomes last year. So all I'm saying is, don't be surprised if they do it.
You know, Barry, and I agree with you, and I think that's what Bob and I alluded to on last week, especially if Mayfield drops. And I don't know if he would drop as far as 27 for the Saints, but I watched the kid enough here in Texas playing the Texas teams, and Oklahoma has been on the dial for me to see on Saturdays, man. And the thing that I like about him, and it's the intangibles. And a lot of people talk about the physical skills, the height and everything else, but Drew Brees, they talked about his height, didn't they? They talked about, I remember on NOLA.com when Drew Brees signed with the New Orleans Saints, a lot of people used to call him hot garbage. I don't know if you remember that, Barry, but people in the forum would say hot garbage, and they disliked him. They thought his arm was going to give out and all this other stuff, right? What I'm saying is this. If you have a guy like Mayfield who's a gamer, who has the winning, that it factor, you know, like Favre had the it factor. It is something innate that's inside of some of these guys. You just know you have a winner.
They have an edge. They have an edge.
Right.
That mental edge.
Right. You know, and Prince said it best. When you got it, things don't come too hard. So, and it just seems like that's the guy that has it. Now, I watched Rosen. He's got a little bit of that last year. I saw enough of it that he's a gamer as well. I don't know about that, the big kid from Wyoming. I don't know much about him. Strong arm.
You're talking about Josh Allen, and Josh Allen, he's got a rocket for an arm, but he's got accuracy issues, and quarterbacks, man, are funny a lot because look at a prime example, Ryan Leaf. We all remember Ryan Leaf's story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was the prototype quarterback coming out of college at Washington State. I mean, he was 6'5", 235. I mean, just a prototypical quarterback. And then he got to the NFL and was a tremendous bust. So, then you get a guy like Eli who comes in there looking kind of scrawny type of, kind of looks like Archie when Archie was young, and got 2 Super Bowl rings. So,
but Barry, think about this: who looked more scrawnier than Brady on those draft videos?
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so,
that's right.
and that goes to the point.
As a matter of fact, when Bledsoe got hurt and they put Brady in, I laughed. I said, "Oh Lord, they're gonna," and they win the Super Bowl. So what do I know? But it just goes to show you, man, it's such a crapshoot. And look, we're talking about Josh Allen's going to fail. He might wind up being the best of the class, or we say Mayfield. I see people who think Mayfield's going to be total garbage. I think he's going to be a star,
right?
Because as you said, he's got that mental edge. It's not necessarily that he's going to be the next Brett Favre or whatever, but that mental edge, man, it's just like you said, and that's the reason why he gets so many of the Brees compared. Look, when Brees came out of Purdue, he didn't set the world on fire. You didn't think of Brees because he was small, because he played at Purdue, so he kind of was over. Brees was an underachiever. An overachiever, I should say, all his life, because he was always an underdog. I mean, people always dismissed him from the time he was, and he won the state title at Texas, which is pretty impressive. He won the 6A state title in the state of Texas, and then he got Purdue to the Rose Bowl. Purdue, right. I mean, right. Purdue's always had a pretty good basketball program, but you never really thought of them as a football powerhouse. And Drew Brees got them to the Rose Bowl, so that to me was a phenomenal accomplishment. And then, as soon as he took over in San Diego, got the Chargers to the playoffs. So, look, man, he's always overachieved all his life and always has been successful where he's at. And I just think Baker Mayfield has that same mental capacity, that same moxie, that same same fire, that passion inside. And those are the kind of guys that win games, because when your team's down 14 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, that's the guy that you could think could lead you back, like Drew Brees did against the Redskins last season. That I think that Baker Mayfield gives me that kind of impression, or that kind of feeling, that when the chips are down and you need a big performance and the gut out a tough win, he's the guy you can count on to do that. And those are the kind of guys, to me, if I was a GM, if I was pulling the trigger, that's the kind of guy I'm going after. I love the Sam Darnold kid, but to me,
I don't see it.
I just worry about it.
I don't see it.
There's some guys that you look at that you think to yourself, you're not so sure about. And then there's other guys you look at, like Lamar Jackson is the perfect example. So many people are predicting failure for this kid.
I don't
think
see
he's
it.
going to be good.
I think so as well. I think so as well, Barry.
Yeah.
Because he's a winner.
Personally,
he's a winner.
Air McNair. Steve Air McNair. That's who he reminds me of.
Yeah.
Everybody's comparing him to Michael Vick. I guess so. I guess you could see him as kind of a tall, right-handed Michael Vick, if you wanted to make that comparison. But to me, he reminds me of Air McNair, because one thing Steve McNair could do, not only could he run, but he was a phenomenal passer. Michael Vick was more of a runner. I never really thought of him as a passer. Air McNair could throw the football. That's how he got the nickname Air McNair. And to me, that's who Lamar Jackson reminds me more of. And if Lamar Jackson somehow becomes a Saint, watch out. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, if I recall, the ESPN guy had him as the Saints pick for the last two mock drafts of his. So let me ask you guys this, Bob and Barry. Do you think the priority should be defensive end versus anyone else? Or if we came across, let's say Ridley was there, should they look at Ridley or DJ Moore?
Well, for me, it depends on what they put on what they prioritize. He said today, a pressure player. Now, that doesn't have to necessarily be a defensive end. That can be an interior guy. You got to remember that they never really replaced Nick Fairley. They got Tyler Davis in there, and they got Onyemata kid who's been improving every snap, every game so far. That he's got more into the rotation and got more action, but they never really replaced Nick Fairley. And what Nick Fairley gave him, that Davidson and Onyemata is still kind of raw, so I don't want to make a judgment on Onyemata yet. But Davidson's solid in a run, but he's not much of a. Let's just call it what it is. He's not much of a pass rusher. I just think that's what they're looking for in a defensive tackle, is not necessarily a big body in the middle, but they want a guy who can get pressure on the quarterback. I think their goal was twofold. They want that. They've already got the secondary pretty much to where they want it.
Joining conference now. This conference is being recorded by the organizer.
Fact that sometimes your best player available could be at a position that you already have. And there's not, obviously you wouldn't, if you had a franchise quarterback
Joining conference now. This conference is being recorded by the organizer.
We can ask him, about how, and all the older Saints fans listening right now, obviously we know who Pat Swilling was. Well, he's compared Harold Landry to Pat Swilling. So, look, even if Harold Landry falls just a little bit, maybe into the teens, that's a guy I could see the Saints considering making a trade for, just because of his skill set and what putting him on that line. Man, imagine having Cam Jordan on one side and Harold Landry coming off the other side. Man, it would just be phenomenal. So, we'll see what they'll do. They could go any number of ways. I get the strong feeling that they might even be leaning offensive line. So, again, it all depends on what Cleveland is the wild card, because you never know what they're going to do. They might pick anybody, So
neither do they.
But based on the way things are going to slot out, just trying to project it, it looks like Landry would be gone. So, who do the Saints take at 27? Your guess is as good as mine right now. I would say it's probably a bullpen, so to speak, of probably like 6 to 7 guys. And I just think, literally once they're on the clock, it's going to come down to a process of where they're going to have, maybe 5 or 6 guys all lumped together. And they'll have to, within, I guess I think you get 10 minutes on the clock now in the first round. I don't even remember how much time you get anymore. It used to be 15 minutes. I think it's 10 minutes now. So they literally have, 9 minutes and 59 seconds to think about, okay, out of these 5 or 6 guys, which one do we like the best? And which one do we think fits our need the most at this particular point? So, again, man, it could be anybody. The only thing I can assure you that it won't be is a punter and a kicker.
And about your question, Kyle, and edge rusher, and to Barry's point, I think it depends on the player. Is it a need, and as Sean Payton talked about wanting to add pressure players this offseason? Absolutely. But I think as the draft creeps on and you look at who is coming off of the board, and Kyle, you and I talked about a couple of the edge rushers that are likely to be available, if not at 27, then somewhere around there. Harold Landry's name came up. We talked about the possibility of Marcus Davenport slipping, and he's raw, but he's a good player. Lorenzo Carter as well. And Sam Hubbard. Sam Hubbard might not be a consistent 14 or 15 sack a year kind of guy, but he should give you 8 to 10, and he sets the edge well against the run as well. So I think any of those guys could be in play. Harold Landry, he's not a great run defender, but if he's going to be the guy that gives you 12 or 13 sacks every year, especially opposite of Cam Jordan, when you have someone like Mike Detillier comparing Landry's skills to someone like Pat Swilling, well, that should make every single one of us take notice. But also to Barry's point, they never really replaced Nick Fairley. And part of the underrated weakness, and weakness is a strong term, but maybe one of the underrated areas of concern for the Saints defense last year was at defensive tackle. I believe that they only got a total of 4 sacks from the defensive tackle position last year. And that includes from Sheldon Rankins, who, moved out to the defensive end position towards the end of the year in some alignments. But they only got 4 sacks from the defensive tackle position. And I don't know if there are any pressure players available in at defensive tackle for the first round, but one guy that I really like as an interior disruptor would fall somewhere in the middle rounds, perhaps the 4th, maybe even later, is R.J. McIntosh from Miami. And there's a couple other guys also that possess that kind of disruptive sort of style
right.
That fairly added to the Saints defense. So I think, jumping back into the first round, I think as you watch, obviously Bradley Chubb is going to come off of the board extremely early. Definitely a top 5 pick, if not a top 3.
And then after that, you have Davenport, you have Harold Landry, Hubbard, and perhaps even Lorenzo Carter could sneak in there at the end of the first round. So I think, and we have to trust what the Saints scouts, what Sean Payton and Dennis Allen and Jeff Ireland has seen out of these guys, because they're sitting in there and they prioritize not only an overall draft board, as we know, but each position and what their top guys are at each position. So I think and you do hate to hear the term it's in it because it's so cliche about best player available, but we know what these guys need. Could you use another cornerback? Absolutely. You can't have too many of them. Barry talked about not having and never having too many athletic playmaking linebackers, and we know that to be true. And it's the same with edge rusher or perhaps wide receiver, as someone like Ridley or even DJ Moore could be in play, and they're a higher impact player than what the available edge rushers are, like you asked about, Kyle, then I think you make a move towards that.
Yeah, and look, and one thing I left off, I kind of got off track there with regards to the wide receivers. I think the Meredith signing gives you, that gives you the slot guy. The problem I have with the Meredith signing, and it's a lot of back and forth speculation. The Bears. Obviously, the Saints team doctors felt differently because you wouldn't sign the guy or make a contract offer to him in the first place if you didn't think the knee was healed. I mean, why would you do, why would you waste $10 million? You're not going to do that. So obviously the Saints medical staff feels that the knee is healing up properly. Obviously, we heard Sean Payton say it. He feels that he'll be ready. He might even, I think they said he might even participate maybe in minicamp. So we'll see. I'm not concerned about it. I just don't think. I mean, I know we had the controversy over Delvin Breaux last year and the whole Osner thing, but I'm praying anyway that the Saints medical staff did their homework on Meredith and that we won't have any issues.
Well, Barry,
God bless Willie Snead. He was a great contributor, clutch player on third down. I mean, we saw in the Minnesota playoff game, he came through again. I just think that Willie probably wore out his welcome with the whole summer incident last year with the DUI thing. I think the organization lost trust in him. Not much, probably speculation on my part. Maybe people a little closer on the inside maybe might have a little different take, but that's just my take on it. I think that they just lost trust in him. And, the Saints are, we've seen it in the past with players like Gillette and Kenny Stills and Graham. When you kind of get on their bad side or you kind of do something that kind of rubs them the wrong way, and maybe if you don't kind of handle yourself in a professional manner or, if you don't handle your business off the field, so to speak, properly, that you kind of fall out of favor. You kind of land in the doghouse. And, like I said, I just hate that for Willie because he's a really good kid. If you ever see him off the field, he's just a very, very quiet and shy guy. God bless him, man. There's some guys you just like to root for. There's just some guy, there's been so many Saints players. I mean, we're going, I'm old, so we're going back to the early 70s, and I've had some personal favorites. Willie Snead was one of my favorites, and so I'm disappointed to see him go. But good luck to him in Baltimore. He's going to need a lot of luck playing with Joe Flacco, believe me. So as far as Brandon Coleman, a lot of people. It shocks me how many Saints fans rag on Brandon Coleman. I don't get the Brandon Coleman hate personally. Tremendous run blocker. That's his biggest value to the team. I know a lot of Saints fans are, why do the Saints keep Brandon? because he's a phenomenal run blocker. And that's an undervalued skill for wide receivers is run blocking. And Brandon Coleman is actually probably one of the better run blockers as a wide receiver in the NFL. You go back and look at a lot of the runs from Kamara and Ingram last year and watch who was doing the blocking downfield. It was Brandon Coleman. So that's why they brought him back. I know a lot of people are disappointed because the hype on Coleman coming in when he came into the league was that he's going to be the next Calvin Johnson. And obviously he wasn't the next Calvin Johnson, but he's still a solid player. And, I get it that Saints fans were hoping they bought into the Calvin Johnson hype and he didn't quite live up to it. But he's still a solid player. And look, I think if there's any one thing that I like about the Saints receiving core, it's how big they are. I mean, you got, 3 guys that are all, 6'3" or taller? I mean, those are some big guys. So Ted Ginn Jr. is the smallest guy they got, I think, at 5'11". So, and if they take a receiver in the draft, I think that's what they're going to target. Not necessarily, obviously, you really don't need a slot guy, but you need a speed guy because Ted Ginn, even though he's still fast, he's fixing to be 32 years old.
Yeah, and Barry
receivers.
Barry, I'm sorry, I wanted to chime in, and that's why I think it's plausible Ridley, if available, or the other young man, someone who still need some speed, guys. We still need some separation.
Yes.
And that's the one thing that hasn't been addressed. Again, great job, phenomenal job the first year with the team. You're right. He's getting older, just like Breeze and everybody else. So you got to be able to have somebody to fill in with the depth. Who will that next person to be the downhill person that's going to put the separation and also put some fear into some of the defensive coordinators to be able to make sure that we cover this person, right? And if you ever watch this kid play, Ridley was a maker. And that's what we need.
Oh, man.
He was a playmaker.
There's certain guys coming out. I mean, every year is different and every class is different, but there are certain guys that you can look at and just pick them out right away and you say to yourself, they're going to be a star. Harold Landry, going to be a star. Anthony Miller, going to be a star. Calvin Ridley, going to be a star. Billy Price, the center for Ohio State, going to be a mauler. Man, go watch some film on Billy Price, the center / guard from Ohio State. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if he fell down near the lower half of the round that the Saints would take him. I mean, go. I saw. I think it was on Twitter maybe, and watch Billy Price destroy this guy. I mean, just destroy this guy. It's unbelievable. You just got to see it. You could probably just go on YouTube and just click Billy Price big hit or something like that. It'll pop up. Just phenomenal. So there's just guys that you can pick out the crowd and you say, oh, that guy's going to be a superstar. And, definitely Calvin Ridley is one.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Barry. A playmaker either way. If Landry's there, I think that's the number one priority more than anything else. But a great, solid defensive tackle will be great at that spot. But Ridley, man, he's hard to overlook, guys. He's very hard to overlook.
Yeah, and look, if you again, I'll allude to it one more time, but if you saw the ESPN mock draft last night where they let all the beat writers for all the 32 cities or 32 teams make the picks, and for some ungodly reason, Calvin Ridley fell down to 27 and Mike Triplett jumped all over it. And they asked him afterwards, why'd you make the pick? And he said, well, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, in the draft class, falls to you at 27. You got to take him. and that's exactly right. And look, if that scenario actually played itself out, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't care if a lot of people will probably say, oh, you didn't need a wide receiver at 27. Yeah, well, yeah. Let Calvin Ridley fall to 27 and watch how quick the Saints pick him.
Yeah.
So, again, Kyle, as you said, that's another position, just like defensive end, linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver, another one where you just can't have too many good wide receivers on your football team. Yeah, there's only one football to spread around, but if Calvin Ridley is on the board and you pass on him, yeah, you'll regret it. Trust me.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you wholeheartedly, man. Hey, Bob, are you still there?
Yeah, sorry, guys. Guys, dealing with some couple issues back here, but we're okay.
Yeah, like a little 9-month-old running around the
house. Yeah, he's stirring. That'll do it. Wanted to ask you guys, when do you think the tight ends start coming off the board? We're starting to see as we get closer to draft day, we're starting to see some of these guys that mostly over the previous month, we were seeing perhaps 2, sometimes even 3 of them get drafted before the end of the first round. Now a lot of these mocks have those same tight ends falling into the second round, into that mid-second round up to mid-third round range that we were mentioning earlier. When can you guys see the tight ends starting to come off the board, and who are going to be the first 2 guys out?
Hey, Barry, Barry, I'm just going to say this. I loved your mock, man. But the thing that scares me is the New England Patriots right now don't have a great love affair with Gronk. And, hey, Mike, the kid from Penn State, if he's there, why wouldn't they Why wouldn't they make a play on this guy?
And look, I've heard. Here's what I've heard. You got to remember, New England's picking twice. They're picking at 23 and they're picking at 31. As you said, they might be. That's always been the Patriots' MO. Is whenever they think a player, obviously with the notable exception of Tom Brady, but whenever there's a player that they feel is getting kind of to that point where, maybe not necessarily long in the tooth, but they can see the end. They can look out in the horizon and see the end getting a little closer for that player X, player Y, whatever, player Z. And they don't hesitate, man. Bam, they're already off and looking for his replacement. Don't be shocked if the Patriots take a tight end with either one of those picks. I've seen that mocked. I've also seen Carolina Panthers because Greg Olsen is looking to become a broadcaster. This could be Greg Olsen's last season in the NFL.
That's true.
Don't be shocked if Carolina pulls the trigger on the tight end. So would they take one at 24? I don't know. That might be a stretch, but I've seen 2 mocks where Carolina took one at 24. I think they're at 24. Or New England taking one at 23. That's how high I've seen tight ends. Now, as you mentioned, Bob, looks like they're coming back down the other side. I had the Saints personally trading back into the second with Cleveland because Cleveland and Indianapolis, I think, both of those teams have 3 second-round picks.
3?
Wow. Because of the Jets trade.
3?
Yeah. So those are 2 teams potentially that the Saints could trade back into the round with. And if I'm the Saints, and I did in my mock, the trade chart, as I found out this morning, is actually outdated. So my trade proposal in the mock is actually a little off. But I think you could trade right back into the top of that round and get a kid like Gesicki, assuming he's still there. I've seen a lot of people mocking him to the Saints at 27. I think Herbie Teope for Towns Picking him this morning had Gesicki going at 27. I even mocked Gesicki at 27 initially right after the combine because like so many people, I bought into the hype. Look, he's a phenomenal player. He's almost like a Jimmy Graham 2.0. In every single way because he can't block either. But he's a phenomenal talent, a phenomenal athlete. And, would I be mad if the Saints took a tight end at 27? Not really, unless it was Hayden Hurst because here's so many people want to know why it's a big deal if you took a guy when he's 25 years old. Well, I guess it's not a big deal. Hurst, a lot of people think he's the most pro-ready of the tight ends, but as we know, he played minor league baseball for the Pirates. And so, he's going to be 25 when the season starts. It's not a big deal, I guess, in that sense, because you figure assuming he gets stays in good shape or whatever, you figure he'll get at least a decade. So that would put him, at 34, 35 years old after his 10th season. So, you still could get a decent career out of him. The thing is, a lot of players, if they stay in great shape, look at Ben Watson. I'll use Ben Watson as an example, who's in, his 15th or 16th season. So if you get a guy who's already 25 when he starts playing, you're basically losing, another 3 or 4 year contract. So you're basically, if you say a player can get 3 really good contracts in a career, well, with Hurst, you probably figure you might get 2 good contracts in his career, and he'll be lucky if he gets a third because he'll already be in his mid-30s by the time he would, So that's kind of why teams were shy away from him in that aspect. But if you want a guy that's pro-ready and it's going to, make an impact immediately at the tight end position, then Hurst might be the most ready, and Gesicki. The Goddard kid, Dallas Goddard from South Dakota State, he might be the best all-around tight end because of his blocking skills, and he's pretty good pass catcher in his own right. I might slightly rate Gesicki a little bit higher than him as a pass catcher, but he's going to be a talent. And Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, Oklahoma, when Mike Detillier comes on, you can ask him about Mark Andrews. I think that's probably his favorite tight end. So there's a lot of good players. And then there's underrated tight ends in the class. Ian Thomas, University of Indiana. Remember that name because that's going to be a kid that's going to be a star, in my opinion. I think he's going to be phenomenal. He's just learning how to play tight end. You only really played it, a year, one good season at Indiana. And when he did, he broke out and became a star on a bad Indiana football team. So that's a name to remember. And I think I even mocked him maybe in one of my mocks to the Saints. I don't recall which one. But I think the tight end class is probably a little deeper maybe than some people give it credit for. It's not the deepest by any stretch, but there's some good players that can be had. And I have a strong feeling that the Saints will definitely draft a tight end. I couldn't nail it down when they'll address it. It just depends on how the board falls. We'll see how it falls.
Well, and you guys know that I'm a Penn State guy, so I have been a Gesicki guy well before the combine, even coming into last season. I was singing his praises. Well, guys, I know we're going to get Mike on here in a minute. And we obviously want to let him do his thing for an hour. But I want to get you guys' thoughts and predictions. And Barry, you just put out a mock draft today, so if you guys that are listening haven't read it yet, definitely tune into the Saints News Network and look up Barry's mock. Me, I'm about to play spoiler because I won't be releasing my mock draft until tomorrow morning through Canal Street Chronicles. But go to you, Kyle, first. Thursday night rolls around. Tomorrow night, what do the Saints do in the first round? You're the Saints general manager.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Pray. Look, bottom line, man. Harold Landry, if he's there, I think that's the most important need for the New Orleans Saints. We saw it that last 10 seconds. You keep on referring to it, Barry. Last 10 seconds, if we had somebody else putting some pressure either up the middle or on the edge helping out Cam Jordan, we probably would have been singing a different tune in Minneapolis a few weeks later. So that's my pick.
Okay. Barry, you or me next?
I'll go next. That way you can finish off, and then we can go straight into Mike Detillier. What I'd like to see him do is, there's two things. There's what I'd like to see him do, and there's what I think they're going to do. So what I'd like to see him do, obviously Harold Landry is my favorite player in the draft. You know, when somebody compares him to Pat Swilling, I want him. Okay, let's just put it out there. I'm an old school guy. I'm from New Orleans. I grew up a Saints fan. You know, you tell me somebody who's got similar skill set to Pat Swilling, I want that guy. Okay, and put him on the opposite side of Cam Jordan. Are you kidding me? Come on. So that's who I'd like to see him get. And obviously, if he falls into the teens, I think a trade up is definitely in play. What I think they're going to do is they're going to do what they've done for 4 of the past 5 drafts, or maybe 3 of the past 5, is take the safe pick or go with the best player available. And just a gut feeling. If it's an offensive lineman, I like Isaiah Wynn, University of Georgia, who could play guard, tackle, and play center if need be. And you can look at Mike Deterrier's draft report, and you'll see that. He was a phenomenal player at Georgia, and he projects as a guard, but he can swing over to tackle, and he can play center. And what do the Saints value more than anything in their offensive linemen? Versatility. The number one thing the Saints value, pretty much in any position they have on a team, but especially on the offensive line, they value versatility. And Isaiah Wynn might be the most versatile offensive lineman in this draft class. And so if he's on the board, it wouldn't shock me at all if they took him. And then the other player, Sam Hubbard, Ohio State. Not just because I know Saints fans make the joke about the Ohio State connection, but he's just a solid player. And if Landry's off the board and Davenport's off the board, I just think that Hubbard, even though he's not necessarily a speed guy off the edge, he's just solid in everything he does. And he's kind of a solid, steady, safe pick. And he's still kind of blossoming, so to speak. So he really hasn't reached his full potential. And obviously, maybe the Ohio State connection. Let's just call it what it is. It does help because you got a guy like Urban Meyer. You got a guy like Urban Meyer in Sean Payton's ear telling you how good this guy is. And when Mike comes on, you can even ask him about Hubbard too. That's another player I think he's pretty high on. So I think that's what they're going to do is make the safe pick, but. The Saints fan in me, the New Orleans kid in me, is hoping they'll trade up for Harold Landry.
All right, let's call Mike, guys.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, I had problems again. Okay, guys, before we get Mike on, real quick, you guys named some fantastic players, and I would love to have any of them in a Saints uniform. But this is what I actually think is going to happen. And Saints fans, don't come through your radios and wrap your hands around my throat just yet. We have a trade alert. And for the first time since 2012, the New Orleans Saints will not be picking in the first round. I believe that they are going to trade back for the first time in the Sean Payton era. I think that they're going to package a couple of things, including a player, to get – you guys mentioned the Indianapolis Colts, and Kyle and I mentioned them last week. Indianapolis Colts have 3 second-round picks. And I think the Saints are going to come out of this draft by moving their first and their third-round pick along with a couple other things, and they're going to end up with 2 second-round picks and a higher third round. So I don't think that they're going to be picking. This is obviously a silly prediction, but I don't think they're going to be picking in the first round. I think that they'll come out with 2 second-round and a third-round pick, 3 picks in the top 70, where I believe that a couple of these players that we have been talking about, a Gesicki or a Hubbard, or maybe an offensive lineman or Anthony Miller, I think that those guys will be available in the second round as well. So that's my logic. And like I said, Saints fans, don't come through your radio. I want to sit there Thursday night too, and I want to see my team pick the next star in a New Orleans Saints uniform. But, yeah, I predict that the Saints will trade back for the first time in the Sean Payton era. I hear you cursing at me under your breath. Do we have Mike on yet?
Okay, hold on.
Hey, Mike.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Mike, this is Bob Rose. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bayou Blitz. Really honored that you take the time out to join us tonight. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. We were just talking a little bit earlier about all of us going out of our minds with the mock drafts and these names of these college players running through our heads. But this is what you do for a living, and you put out that tremendous draft guide. Is your brain on overload yet?
No, not really. Listen, this is 33 years for me, and so I've been through this clam bake a number of times, and for me, it's more than anything. It's almost redundancy. You do 15, 18 shows a day. You're doing newspaper interviews and TV and everything else. So, you're getting into the 20s here and beyond. And so you sort of being asked the same question over and over, and you're just trying to find new ways to answer. So, but I enjoy the process. I think the biggest thing about the draft is no one knows, not even people in the football world. And I can't tell you how many people in the league today either sent a text or called about, what do you hear about this team, or what are you hearing about this player? And so they don't really know either. That's what makes it a great mystery, and that's why it's the most covered event in the United States. It's covered 52 weeks out the year, 365 days. There isn't any place where there isn't something being written about the draft year-round. And I would know because I get pulled and tugged in that direction. So it's great. I like the fact that the process is almost to an end, and now the mystery starts about exactly how it falls. And this is what you prepared for since January. You prepared for every scenario you think could happen, and yet there are scenarios of events that you somewhat unexpectedly occurs, and you have to react. And that's what makes the preparation part paramount in the league. And also finding what's best for you. I say this all the time, but it's true. I think there are probably 5 to 7 players in any draft class that no matter where they end up, the production's the same. The other 99% is all have to do with fit and scheme and coaching and the X factor, health. Can you stay healthy? So it's a great deal, and it has a lot of mystery to it. And again, the coverage of it from when I first started 33 years ago is unbelievable how it is today.
Oh yeah, we can all remember the draft all being taking place in one day. They started at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, and wound up at 3 o'clock, finishing up at 3 o'clock the next morning. I can only imagine doing someone in your position doing that type of coverage. You probably slept for 2 days after the fact.
Yeah, and for me, I'm good with a couple of 3 hours, and then I can roll. And so, it's I might be middle-aged, but I don't live that way. and I got witnesses, to prove it, so to speak.
When we get off air, I'll have to get your tips on how to do that, because I'm running on fumes most of the time as it is. Listen, over your career, next to especially covering the Saints, what is the, outside of the Mike Ditka trade for Ricky Williams, what is the biggest shocker that you have covered during Saints draft coverage?
Whoa. Biggest shocker. I know they're
maybe Jonathan Sullivan, maybe.
No. Here's Jonathan Sullivan. I knew. And the reason why, I don't think he'd mind me saying this. Weeks before the draft, Rick Venturi, who was at that time the defensive coordinator, called me up, and we had a long talk about Sullivan. And that was some divide, let's just say that. And where they would go with if they were going to pick Sullivan or not. Really who they wanted was Polamalu. That was sort of in the plans. The debate was, do you pick Sullivan or Kevin Williams? And I told Rick, let me call Carl Dunbar. Carl Dunbar was the defensive line coach at that time at Oklahoma State. And I know Carl pretty well. I called him up, and he said, what are the Saints thinking about doing? I said, I think they're thinking about picking Jonathan Sullivan. He said, well, they better carve a bust for him in the NFL Hall of Fame. Because he said, man, if he's better than Kevin Williams, man, he must be unbelievable. He said he's the best defensive tackle I've ever coached. So I relayed that to Rick. And, I don't know kind of what went through the deal, but the Sullivan thing wasn't a shock to me. The Ricky Williams thing really wasn't a shocker to me, too. Terry O'Neill, who at that time was sort of keeping Diliberto and I up to snuff on what was happening, and it got to be this sort of a snowball effect of even Mr. Benson getting involved and said, give them what they want to get Ricky. And so that was a real winner. I think other than that, probably was another Ditka pick in Chris Nioli. I knew that that's not who their scouting department wanted. They really wanted Warrick Dunn from Florida State. Kind of a hometown kid, from Baton Rouge, went to Florida State. But Mike walked in and said, these are the guys I want. And the word trickled out earlier that morning that he might pick Nioli. But even that sort of surprised me, because I thought Chris would have been a late first-round pick. And he ended up being a pretty high first-round pick. So that probably, if you'd have told me that 72 hours early, I wouldn't have believed it. But because Mike had kind of walked the edge a little bit and talking about Warrick Dunn. Had he done the Warrick Dunn deal, then the Ricky Williams deal would have never happened, because he'd have had his guy. So one domino hit the next domino on that particular deal. And I wasn't, I was around, but I wasn't covering the draft for, Erkslavin and some of these other picks. So, man, you go back to that, you just shake your head about who was involved. But I think you're starting to see it today, too, in Cleveland. Very similar to John Meekum Jr., that Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Browns, is sticking his nose in a lot of these picks, and a lot of the early picks. Now, listen, you got a lot of people in this world that try to kid you and say, man, if I'm in charge, my boss ain't telling me nothing. Oh, really? Yeah, and you're unemployed, too. Today in the NFL, if you own a team, you're not a millionaire, you're a billionaire. And that guy has got his money quickly and from different areas. And if he walks in that room and said, this is the guy I want, you might have to swallow hard and say exactly. And John did that with the Saints for Erkslavin. He wanted Russell, and against the wishes of the scouting department, who wanted Jerry Robinson, who ended up being a really good outside linebacker with the Eagles from UCLA, the Saints went with Erkslavin.
What kind of we see it every single year in the draft. Players tumble a lot of times, and obviously with all the TV coverage, you'll see a guy sitting in the infamous green room, well past where they were projected to go. Do you see, what players do you see that potentially happening this year, where everybody's saying that they're going to go early, perhaps even top 10, and they're sitting and waiting, if not, and maybe not even getting drafted in the latter stages of the first round, but waiting beyond that? What players do you see that happening to potentially?
I don't know about waiting into because it's a short list this year in comparison to others. I think the receivers might have a little bit of a sit down. This might take a while for Calvin, Ridley, and DJ Moore to stand up. And I even had to talk with Geis that, hey, listen, you might have a while to sit here. And Darius, man, look how I grew up. And, for me to sit, that's not a big thing. I just want an opportunity. I just want my chance. And so I think the receivers might last a little bit longer than we expect. And the other part, and I spoke to some agents of a couple of these guys, is at the center guard position, where it's really thick. It's probably the thickest area of the draft. And it's going to be in the 20s, and it could be mid to late 20s before you start to see that peel come off on, a James Daniels, a Will Hernandez, an Isaiah Wynn. They may have to wait a little while for it. They'll still be first-round picks, but you might have to wait a while. I guess the other guy would be Leighton Vander Esch, because there's so much discussion about the medicals on him, on how real that is, how real that's not. I'll tell you a real quick story. Anthony Munoz told me this story. So when I came out of USC, out of the top 6 teams that picked that year, I flunked 4 physicals. And yet he ended up going with the second pick of the draft, and he's one of the premier offensive left tackles to ever put on a jockstrap and a helmet. And he didn't miss any time in the NFL. But, sometimes you kind of get caught up in that vacuum or that void of believing what a lot of agents try to spin a story today on negativity on another player. And you have to be careful about that, of running with something that may not necessarily all be true, that there may be a bit and a piece, but it's not all there. And what they try to do is smear that player because they got a guy at the same position that they want to elevate. Just like the running backs. Nobody can touch Barkley. But look who they've went after. They went after Geis. They went after Ronald Jones II, putting out information from a league source, which that come from an agent, but they don't want to say it, that maybe his interviews didn't go well, that he didn't maybe test out well in the one-on-ones. Now, all of a sudden, Sony Michel may have some medical issue, but we can't tell you what it is. Okay? So listen, I didn't go to Cornell or Harvard or Yale, but even I know that's coming from an agent of a running back who's trying to elevate his client. And he's using the different sources in the NFL they go to. Listen, I get it. So I understand where that's coming from. And so I tell a lot of young reporters and people who grab onto that, just be careful with that sort of thing, because a lot of times, 99 chances out of 100, a lot of that is made up or trumped up, so to speak. It's got a bit of a piece of the truth in it, but it's not entirely correct. So to answer your question, I think the receivers may last a little bit longer than we think. I think the offensive linemen, interior-wise, may last a little bit longer than we might think. And I'm interested in Vander Esch because of the fact that he's one of the true linebackers that can also drop in coverage well. He can play on the weak side. He can play in as a Mike linebacker. He's very versatile. Hasn't been used tremendously a lot as a pass rusher, but he can do that. But he's a one-year kind of wonder, and he didn't have a medical, but he's been passed with all that, hadn't missed any time. So, again, kind of be careful of what you believe in this sort of thing. And a lot of times, what you don't know is what you don't know. Behind the scenes, who's making the calls here? Is it the general manager? Is it the head coach? Is it the owner? Especially in round one, that guy can walk in that room and say, that's who I want, that's who I'm going to get. I doubt seriously if Sean Payton walked in the room and said, this is the person I want to get, and I want him. I don't think you'd have a lot of people debating him about it.
How about the tight ends? Where do you see this draft class of tight ends? I mean, we've talked about We've talked about players like Gesicki and Goldert and Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst. Where do you see those guys starting to come off of the board? And do you have a favorite out of that group?
They're all jammed for me, sort of numerically. I mean, it is really close. And one may go in round one. I don't have a first-round pick grade on a tight end. So I've got all four and a potential fifth in Ian Thomas all going in the second round. That's a lot of tight ends. I don't remember another year it being like that, you got that much kind of closeness ratings-wise and the talent, because all of them really are big wide receivers that play some tight end. I think Goddard and Hurst are the better blockers, and I don't think there's even a debate on that. Gesicki, I mean, he ain't thrown one good block in his life. So you understand what you're getting. You understand the type of player you're getting. He's a tremendous athlete, but he's a king-size receiver playing tight end. And he is certainly a threat because of his athletic skills. He's a big man who can run. He's got great leaping skills. But, again, my thing about it is, if you're at least not an average blocker, I can't give you a first-round pick grade. Goddard came the closest, and I think he's the best of the bunch. I watched him play a ton at South Dakota State. He's a big man receiver with excellent speed. He finds that sweet spot. He had a quarterback that was a bit of a bird dog thrower. Man, he eyed him up but good. So Dallas would, I think, sometimes not race downfield because he wanted to hit the spot where the quarterback was throwing the football. And I can say the same thing with Gesicki. I mean, that guy Penn State got, he was all over the board too throwing it. But he, in my opinion, he's the best of the bunch. Not only as a receiver, but he's a real solid blocker. And then it was almost a dead heat between Gesicki and also Hayden Hurst. Many people will look at 25 years old. Man, I don't care if he's 25 years old. I mean, he's mature. He's played, tremendous football for South Carolina. He's not a speed burner, but, boy, he knows how to get open. He's real quick in short spaces, and he knows how to find that spot. And if you played Major League Baseball at any level, I know one thing, you got eye-hand coordination. You catch the ball. And he's solid as a run blocker. They ask him to do a lot of that. He does a good job walling people off. Gesicki's the athlete. I mean, he's a tremendous athlete. Great size. Former basketball player. You could tell by the way he plays that part of it is in his game. He's sometimes a getting away blocker, but even that's questionable. You watch sometimes, he just kind of skinnies up a little bit when defenders are around him, and they kind of got to roll around him. But he's not the greatest blocker in the world. And Mark Andrews is a big target tight end, great hands. Baker Mayfield told me as a Manning camp, the most trusted guy I have on that team is Mark Andrews. I know where he is on every play. He hits the spot, and I hit him. He's got great hands. He's not going to be your anchor on the 4x400-meter relay team. But he makes good plays after the catch, and he's real effective in the red zone. And Ian Thomas came from a real tough background. Nico goes to Indiana, tremendous athlete. He can flat out fly out on the field. Catches the ball well, out front with his hands. He did a little work as a pass block, as a route runner, but he's solid as a inline blocker. He gives you great effort. He's on the left side as a player, but boy, he's athletically, he's really, really skilled. So I got all of them going either in the second or very, very early in round three. I can't remember another year with that many tight ends. And again, I'm not saying one won't go in round one, but I don't have any of those with a first-round pick grade. So it is what it is. You got a good core here of guys at that tight end position, and it's an offshoot of 7-on-7. And those big 6'5" guys, they don't want to play defense. Hey, let me catch the ball. I'll play tight end.
Barry, did you have anything for Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mike, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yes, sir. Just a quick question. As you know, every year, Mr. Mike, I have a draft crush. And you personally are responsible for my draft crush this year because Harold Landry at Boston College, you compared him to Pat Swilling. And any older Saints fan listening right now can certainly appreciate Pat Swilling when he came out of Georgia Tech. We know how phenomenal of a player he was. I realize probably that Landry is a long shot, but if you would, because I'm partly responsible for the hype, I guess, just if you would, just for a minute, give us a little something in your view or your take of Harold Landry and why you think he compares to Pat Swilling.
Well, I saw Pat come out of Georgia Tech. Pat was a third-round pick. A lot of people think Pat was a first-round pick. He was a third-round pick. Bill Parcells told me that he's the only one-on-one private workout he ever went to as a coach. Pat Swilling. And he didn't pick him. And he said, I regretted it every time I saw him play. But, when you look at Harold, he's built along the same lines. He's a long, lean athlete, quick with his feet off the snap, and has that real sharp bend and ability to use his hands to get around that offensive lineman and get into the backfield, and really good closing speed. And when you watched him last year, you could see that the ankle injury affected him and that he was not as quick. He didn't quite have the closing speed. And, when your ankle's jacked up, you lose a little bit of balance with it. And a lot of times he was kind of getting bounced a little bit when they were running toward his side of the field. But healthy, he's a dynamite pass rusher. He can put his hand in the dirt and play defensive end. He can come off the edge as an outside linebacker. And you can move him around like the queen's piece in chess defensively. And it's funny, I've heard Dennis Allen talk about, that those type players are rare to get your hands on. And boy, when you can get a guy like that, you really know you've got something. And my initial thought was at 27, it might be sort of lengthy to go there, but I still think he may last until 19, 20, 21. And it wouldn't cost you a lot to move from 27 to a 21 to get him. And I do know from people in the organization that they've paid a lot of attention to Harold. And just let me say that. I know they've done a lot of work on Harold as a player. And so it was easy for me to compare him to Swilling, and that's what I wrote in my book, because they have the same sort of attributes in how they rush the quarterback. And they're built sort of the same. And in the world today, probably Pat would play defensive end a lot, because, you could swing him around a little bit. So that was the reasoning why I had a super productive junior year. But, again, the ankle wasn't quite there for him as a senior. You saw it affect his play. And one thing I give him a lot of credit, a lot of guys wouldn't have played. I'm just telling you, a lot of guys wouldn't have done it. They would have said, I ain't playing. It's going to make me look bad. The same thing, people don't get this about Darius Geis. He had an ankle and a knee injury. He could have easily said, I'm not playing. I'm not playing. I ain't healthy. He went out there and got it out. It goes to show some of the stupidity that you hear and you read today is amazing about what they don't know about a player at all. Because a lot of these guys that tell you that the analysts, when they started studying film? January. Okay. Tell me how many guys you can kind of filter out from January to now. It's almost like you're a coach. You know a few of those players, but you don't know all of them. And you make your assumption off of the year you saw, maybe not the year you didn't see. And so that's why you kind of get caught up with that. But I think Harold's a guy the Saints have a lot of interest in. You probably have to move up to get him. And I know it's an area where if they make a move, I think it's going to be for a front guy, a defensive line. I think that Rashawn has basically come out and told you that, I want to help the pass rush. It's an outside guy and an interior guy. Look what he did in free agency. They made a move toward Muhammad Wilkerson. They made the move toward Ndamukong Suh. Mm-hmm. Those two guys don't play defensive end. They play defensive tackle.
Yeah.
So that tells me, without telling me, that's an area he wants to beef up. Because he knows in the NFC, it is literally a personnel arms race to see who can accumulate the most amount of talent up front. Because I'm interested tomorrow, and also day 2 with the second round, is I think the big difference between the NFC and the AFC is about what they've done up front, offensive, defensive lines. I think they've pulled away from the AFC because of the strength there. And they're more stable at quarterback also, but I think up front, in the trenches, that's why they pulled away from the AFC. The only AFC team, to me, that looks like an NFC team at the top is Jacksonville. The Steelers don't look like that anymore. The Patriots are who they are. The Titans have a bit and a piece. I think they'd want to be that way, but they're still in the building stages of that. Kansas City, offensive line-wise, I can't say that they're on the level of those top NFC teams. And so you see it. That's where the Minnesotas and New Orleans and Atlantas and Carolinas and Dallas and the Rams and Philly, they're pulled away because of what they've got up front in their offensive and defensive lines. Does that continue in the first 2 rounds, where you're going to have a ton of those guys picked, and do you continue to bolster that area where I think a lot of NFC teams feel, and you know what, unless a really good running back or receiver falls to me, I'm not picking them early. I'm going to pick them later because I want to build up front. I want to build up front with the big men. The Greek settled this years ago. He had a chance to pick a really talented big guy and a really talented small dude. Who did they pick? Come on, who got the most money? It was the big dude. So, the NFL is the same way, unless you need a quarterback, because either you got one or you're looking for one.
Well, yeah, you mentioned quarterback, and obviously that's the major topic of just about every draft these days. A lot of things that are on most of Saints fans' mind. Do you think, or can you see this team moving up to get a quarterback this year?
It would surprise me in round 1, because the cost to do that would be a lot. You have not really heard Sean beat his chest about any of those players. And I know last year we met up and he talked to me about Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. He didn't say one word to me about Trubisky. All he talked about was Mahomes, and he's kept to that script. And he was really high on Deshaun Watson also. But I don't know if he's sure about guys, those top 5 guys. And I don't think he would say it or Mickey would say it, but the reality is, with a 39-year-old quarterback, it's all chips in. You got to do it the next 2 years. Do they pick one a little bit later? Do they target a guy like a Kyle Lauletta a little bit later in the draft? That's a distinct possibility. But, I can't see the Saints just pick a quarterback just to pick one. He's got to be the right guy for you. And I think Sean feels that way, that, if it's just to pick a quarterback, you can pick one every year. But I want a guy that can compete. And, I don't know that they would have that type of draft capital to move up that high to get a quarterback, unless a weird scenario of events would occur and you would start to see someone tumble for whatever reasons. And then the possibility would occur. But you know what? I wouldn't put my money on it.
And you mentioned some of the late round guys. Kyle Lauletta, Riley Ferguson, Mike White. Which one of those guys really jump out to you as a guy that maybe Sean Payton might grab in a 5th or a 6th or even a 7th rounder for a potential developmental prospect?
Well, the letter won't last that long. I think he's going to end up going either in round 2 or very early in round 3. I'll give you a guy that, I want to see him. And he troubles me sometimes because of some of his throws. But, boy, he's got a lot. It's Chase Litton from Marshall. He's a guy who was a 60% passer at Marshall. He came out early, but he threw for over 8,300 yards and 72 touchdowns at Marshall. He's got great size. He's almost 6'5", super strong arm. Again, a 61% passer at Marshall. He can make all the NFL throws. He's not super mobile, but he's enough to get out of the way a little bit. His accuracy skills, because he throws the ball a little off balance, is what I see. A lot of times he's an arm thrower. He doesn't set up well with his body balance and throw the football. Boy, he intrigues me as a player. Now, he's got some off-the-field issues as a young man earlier in his life, but he's almost a 6'5", 230-pound flamethrower. I mean, that ball comes out of there, and he's impressive throwing the football. He's a guy, as a later-round pick, I would really like. Again, he's not the most mobile guy in the world, but, boy, he can hum it as a passer. And so he's somebody I would like later in the draft. And I think with a good quarterback coach, to get, and I put this in my book, to get some of the kinks out of his game, which a lot of it is mechanical, I really like Chase Litton from Marshall as a later round pick.
Kyle, what kind of questions do you got for us?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm fine, Kyle. Thank you.
Good. Look, when you talked about defensive tackles, anyone that really stands out, maybe I missed it from your earlier part of your conversation, but I'm interested to see who you think could be a good fit in Sean Payton's system.
I would love for Taven Bryan to last that long. Now, I don't think he will. But of all the defensive tackles, I think he's got the best pass rush ability of all of them, potential-wise, from the NFL standpoint is concerned. He's a one-year starter. Actually saw him in a camp years and years ago. He came down because, he's a Wyoming kid. And he fell in love with Florida the first time he took the visit there. I guess a lot warmer there in November and December than it is in Wyoming. But, man, he's almost 6'5". He's 295 pounds, runs well. Last year, he was a really dominant inside player for Florida. He did a great job. A bit of a one-year wonder, and he's a guy that's got a lot of upside to his game. And I think in today's game, because it's so hard to get the edge guys to get pressure, you got to find a guy that can push the inside pocket. And I like that part of being able to get that pressure from the inside. I think to remember, too, Kyle, is who's your defensive line coach? And that's Ryan Nielsen. And he's got 5 defensive linemen that could be picked in his draft class that he coached at NC State. And one of those guys who I really like is B.J. Hill from North Carolina State. He's a big 6'3", 315-pound kid, super strong, run stuffer. He's not a great pass rusher, but what he does, he sort of forklifts that center guard right back into the lap of a quarterback. And he's really good on the chase down ability. He pushes that inside pocket really, really well. And I'm impressed with him. Another guy I know that they like a lot is Nathan Shepard from Fort Hays State, who's almost 6'4", 315. First time I've seen him, my thing is, that looks like Akeem Hicks. I mean, he's built like him, plays like him. He's got that initial push up the field as a pass rusher. He can run the field well. Watched him at the Senior Bowl. He got in there, and he was really good in the practices until he had a little injury and had to pull out. He's a rough around the edges type player, but he's also a guy that can get you pressure at the middle, and also stop the run. Is he ready for prime time yet? I'm not real sure. But, boy, he's talented. And, again, my comparison to Nathan Shepard would be Akeem Hicks. I think he's farther along than what Hicks was when he came out, because Hicks had to adjust to the NFL game, where in Canada you have to line up 1 yard off the line of scrimmage. And, man, that gives the offensive line a lot of – man, I think I could play there. I mean, if you're giving me a step that I can catch you and sort of leverage you, you're not making a ton of plays there. But, boy, you see Nathan Shepard play. He's impressive. So I think those are the guys sort of say you would look at maybe in the third round that you would kind of keep an eye on, that have that big, bulky body to stop the run and also push the inside pocket. And it does tell you something, that they did go after Wilkerson, they did go after Sue, is that I'm not sure Sean was thrilled about the run defense he was getting from his defensive tackles, especially when they had to move Sheldon out the defensive end. Teams were kicking that pretty hard inside, and I think Sean's deal is, no, this ain't going to happen. I want a big man inside to play defensive tackle.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, sir.
Yeah, you talk about the defensive tackles, and you drop some great names. What about a guy from like R.J. McIntosh from Miami, or Sanat? And I apologize if I mispronounced his name. Sanat from South Florida. Where do you see them going, and do you see them fitting into what you just said about Sean Payton wanting to beef up the interior defensive line?
I scouted R.J. He was a defensive end in high school at Cardinal Gibbons in Florida, and he was one of the better defensive ends coming out. He got a little bit too big to play defensive end. They kicked him inside, but he has played some defensive end at Miami, but he's really a big interior player. He's 6'4", 290. The thing that jumps out at you with him is he's got almost an 83-inch wingspan. Man, he's like a big condor. I mean, when you got an 83-inch wingspan, man, you can get around people. You can know how to use those arms and wield around pretty well. The thing I see with RJ is very inconsistent. One game, he really looks good, and in other games, maybe not so. He's a stock market type player all the way across the board, and that always troubles me a little bit, that someone that gifted, what happened that he wasn't dominant where he was playing? Sanat is a 6 foot tall, 315-pound guy. He's not going to be a great pass rusher at the NFL level. What he does is tie up blockers inside. He's a big run stuffer, super strong in the upper body. He's had to deal, with a lot of personal issues. He lost his parents, both of them, over the last 2 years. For a young man, that kind of measures on you. And I like his play. I just don't want him to get too heavy. But he's a power player inside. He gives you great effort. And despite the fact he's not a great pass rusher, I think also he's a guy that'll probably end up going in that middle to latter part of round 3, just because he could play the nose and also play a defensive tackle. But if you're looking for a pass rusher, so that's not your guy. I mean, that's not what he excels at. But boy, if he stopped the run at South Florida, he was like a big fire plug inside, and you wasn't getting around him.
And you mentioned pass rush ability, and we talked a little bit earlier about Harold Landry and some of the edge rushers. What kind of grade do you have on Sam Hubbard?
Sam's a late first, early second round pick guy. I think he's this year's version of Ryan Ramczyk on defense, in that he's maybe not going to test through the roof as an athlete. But then when you watch him play, you come away impressed. He's so well coached. Larry Johnson is one of the best defensive line coaches in the history of college football. He was at Penn State, and he goes to Ohio State with Urban. Done a fantastic. Just look at all the guys up front that he's been able to produce at Ohio State. And so Hubbard is technically strong, knows how to use his arms and hands really well. He's got good speed off the edge. He's not the burner. He's not a guy that's going to beat you with a lot of speed moves. But as a technician, he's really good, and he gets a real quick start off the snap, plays the run well. He plays with good body balance. They have kicked him inside as a defensive tackle in their version of the NASCAR package that they use, where they want to get the 4 best pass rushers, and they've used him inside. And he does a nice job because he out-athletics that guard real quick. Mike Rabel had him in with the Titans for, a visit. And, I think they must look at each other and say, well, Mike must have, that's how I looked when I came out. Because, there's a lot of similarities between the two guys. And to be honest, I think Hubbard's a better player coming out of college than what Mike was. So it depends on what you're looking for. I think he could play some stand-up outside linebacker in a 3-4 lineman. But it's his ability to move him around a little bit as a defensive end, to kick him inside on obvious third-down passing situations. You can move him around as a stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker. You watch the film of the Michigan game in Southern Cal, he kicked the stew out of those guys. I mean, he was dominating in those 2 games where he sort of freelanced a little bit. And he knew one thing, he wasn't going to get a lot of chip blocks because of the guy on the other side in Bosa. Bosa was getting that. He wasn't. Troy Bosa's brother, Nick, he was getting a lot of chips, and Sam wasn't. And I think both Michigan and USC decided we're not going to let Bosa control the game. But what happened is Hubbard did. And so he stepped up his play. I like him a lot. Blue collar, tough, hard blows. You want him there. I don't think he'll ever be a great player in the NFL, but he'll always be a good one. And so, similar to Ramchak, in that he may not be the greatest athlete in the world, he can flat out play. And from day one, he's going to play and play a lot in the NFL.
Excellent, thank you. What are some of the other edge rushers that are maybe flying under the radar that you could see really making an impact as a rookie, as a mid-round pick?
Oh, goodness. This isn't a great year for edge rushers. I'll be honest with you. Last year was a record year, and it may be the last of the Mohicans for a while for edge rushers. Next year is going to be a really good year for interior defensive linemen. But I just think 7-on-7 is sort of killing that defensive end outside linebacker position more and more. I like Aruna from Tulane. He's rough around the edges as a pass rusher, but he's a tremendous athlete, got a lot of want to. He's gotten much better technically as a player. Now, he only played 1 year of high school football, only one. But, you saw him at Tulane. He was aggressive. He ran the field well, and he's an athlete at the tip-top level. And you know a lot about him. You have Curtis on the staff. He recruited him, so you know a lot about him. I like Breland Speaks also from Ole Miss. I wasn't crazy about him as a defensive tackle. I had to talk with one of the coaches there at Ole Miss in the offseason. My thing is, why are you having him at defensive tackle? And he's like, well, you're thinking about moving the defensive end. When they moved the defensive end, he was terrific last year. And 8 tackles for losses, 7 quarterback sacks. He's a little immature as a player, but I think he understands what it takes to play this game. He was with Arden Key, and they worked at Chuck Smith's camp. And Saints fans will longtime Saints fans know who Chuck Smith is. Great player at the University of Tennessee. If there's anybody that gave Willie Rowe troubles in the NFL, it was Chuck with Atlanta. And Chuck has told me Speaks is a tremendous player. He's got a lot of upside to him, learning how to use his arms and hands a little bit better. And I like him a lot. And he's not had that injury situation. And a lot of people on the Josh Sweat thing. And my thing about that and I guess I bring it up because everybody fell in love with the workouts. Oh, what a great workout. Tell me what he did in college that jumped out at you. And most people can't. He was an erratic player. He's had 3 knee injuries. Some plays, he plays all out. Other plays, takes it easy. Yeah. If somebody wants to be that Dr. Phil and change him, God bless you, if you can do it. But he was the hot defensive end guy. Everybody's writing, oh, Josh Sweat, because of his workouts. Watch him play. He's never been a dominant player. Never was. He was in high school before he hurt his knee, but he's never been that big-time player, at the college level. And then he comes out early. So, again, he's a maybe guy. Athletically, he's got everything that you're looking for. But where's the production? Why is somebody that physically gifted and yet doesn't make a bunch of plays? Why is that the case? So explain to me why. Am I going to use an early round pick on him? I might pick him a little bit later. I'm not using an early round pick on Josh, despite the fact I think he's gotten a lot of people, wet in the pants about his athleticism. One guy to watch, and I really like him, is Marcel Frazier, too, from Missouri. He's a guy who had some injuries last year, but, in that when you watched him play, he's always around the football. He's a playmaker, a JUCO guy, and in 2 seasons he had 28 tackles for losses and 16.5 quarterback sacks. And he missed time with injuries. I like him as an edge rusher, as a middle to later round pick. He's impressive as an athlete, and Missouri has pumped out a lot of guys the last few years that can play defensive line. I think early on, until he sorts of fills out that 6'4" frame, he'll be a designated pass rusher, but he'll be a good one. And he knows how to track that quarterback down real quickly.
Barry, what else you got?
Well, Mr. Mike, here's a question I wanted to ask you about cornerbacks, because obviously the Saints picked Marshawn Lattimore last year, obviously because Mahomes got taken the pick before, so they wasn't really planning on taking him originally. But I think it's an underrated position for them to address again. So a 2-part question. A, could you actually see them addressing corner again? Just let's say if they get on the board at 27 and it just so happens that, let's say, a Josh Jackson or Isaiah Oliver is there. Could you actually see them, like I had in my mock yesterday, going after a corner again just because it's the best player available? And if so, who's a cornerback in this year's class that you like specifically?
Yes, I think, I debated that a lot. And the guy that I almost had, it came down to 2 corners and Howell. And one was Alexander, the cornerback from Louisville, who I think is probably going to get picked before the Saints pick. And the other one was Michael Hughes from Central Florida. And I know Mike's had some off-the-field issues, but all I knew is in watching him play as a mirror cover corner, he does a great job. I mean, his receiver didn't catch squat at Central Florida. He was on them all over the place. Did a great job in one-on-one man coverage. He's cocky. He's a little bit arrogant out on the field, and I like that. Listen, if you are, you can back it up. So what? And the other part is, look what he does as a punt kick return guy. Now, the kickoff game, who knows where that's going to end up? Because I think in our lifetime, we may see the kickoff eliminated completely, especially at the collegiate level. Punt returner, he averaged over 15 yards of punt return. My thing about it is, after the first couple of punts he brought back, my thing is, which special team coach is that dumb to keep kicking him the ball? After he's returned that many for that type of yardage, and you continually kick it to him, you can't be real sharp. Either that or your special teams allows it. But I like his cover skills. One-on-one, out on the island. And he is a guy that's outstanding doing that. Now, again, that's the off the field part. And he knows he's going to get sued on it. And it's going to be a civil case that, he's going to get sued. And he has said it, that it's more than likely going to happen, even though he wasn't charged. Isaiah is interesting. He's a little bit bigger cover corner. His dad, I remember his dad at Oregon. He was a tremendous athlete, played in the NFL, was a highly rated track athlete, and more so a track athlete than a football player. And a lot of people thought he was going to go to college to run track, and then he signs on with Colorado, and he's been a really good player there. Outstanding athlete. He's got good size. He's smooth with his turn and run skills. I know in talking to the Colorado coaches, what they brought up was about his temperament and that he wants to be the very best that he can be, and always working at his skill set, his athleticism, his techniques, always working at that. And I like that. When you hear that from a coach, that, he's always trying to get better. Now, physically, he could get a little bit stronger. Like a lot of track athletes, they haven't worked so much on the upper body, and he could be better, in the up the field tackling skills. But I think he's also an interesting player, real interesting player. And the fact that he was a junior that came out early. And he's been from a school that has put out a lot of defensive backs. Man, I don't know who's recruiting those defensive backs at Colorado, but that dude ought to get a raise, because every year they got 2 or 3 guys that they have recruited, and none of them from Colorado, because Isaiah's an Arizona guy. They do a fantastic job bringing in defensive backs. So I think that that's a distinct possibility that they could go that route. Josh, I like. He's a bit of a one-year wonder. I think he plays the ball in flight better than any of the corners in this draft class. He really plays it like a receiver. He's got good turn and run skills. He's going to need a little bit of work with his back pedal. But, again, the big question I have is, why didn't the light come on quicker for him? Why did it take all the way until his senior year? But then I look at what happened with Debo Jones at LSU, and I can say the same thing there. What happened at LSU? When, I think that there I can figure it out. The coach wasn't crazy about him. I don't think John Chambers really liked Debo, and so that's why he didn't play him. But you look at Oliver and Jackson and Mike Hughes, all those guys, I wouldn't have a squawk if you picked any of them late in round 1. Because, it solidifies a position that's so difficult to get, to have a guy that can lock up a receiver. And you can't just have 2. You need 3, and most of the time you need 4 that can act. Because, what happens if somebody gets hurt? You're in the nickel almost 70% of the time. So your third corner, he's a 3-quarter starter. And for this football team, what happens if you had an injury to Lattimore? What happens if you had an injury to Kim Crawley? You could easily, buddy, he always says next man up, and I always tell it, Bobby J, depends on who the next man is. That's a great coach's saying, next man up. But in reality, it's not real. It depends on who the next man is.
Yeah.
I would have no squawk about it, and actually, I came very close, to that debate. And really, I almost put either Hughes or Jerry Alexander in that spot. I really did. Actually, I had a mock draft with both of them, and one with Landry. And I went with the one with Landry, but I could see that happening. And certainly Oliver's a guy that he's on that cusp, too. A late first, early second round pick, and he's a little bit bigger corner than Hughes and Jair are. He's not as technically refined. But you know what? You got Aaron Glenn. He knows a lot about playing cornerback. Yep. And I don't think the learning curve would be great for Isaiah, who I think is a really good football player. I love the fact that the Colorado coaches will tell you of how much work he puts into being a better player each and every day.
Hey, Bob, can I ask Mike a question?
Oh, please.
Mike, And this takes me back to last year. Our friend Coach Rick Gailey, and we're praying for you, Coach. Keep hanging in there, buddy.
You're enough.
Yeah. So look, Coach said this on our kickoff draft special last year that, hey, I know from insiders that Alvin Kamara, they went to some private workouts with him. Sean Payton really likes him. And people kind of like, okay, yeah, Alvin Kamara, and voila, the Saints did what they did to be able to get him, right? Are there any?
Yeah, I think I know who told Coach that.
Okay, probably you, right?
yeah, because Sean told me. So this year he's been a little bit more closed mouth about certain things. But okay. I can tell you one guy I know he likes. Anthony Miller, the wide receiver from Memphis. And this is what I think may well happen. If you start to have a run, and there's always that case of a couple positions. If the run happens, let's say at cornerback, and then you get a couple tight ends go, and then, the receivers that didn't go maybe as high as you thought maybe start to have a little run, and then the big men go, there's going to be a guy who falls. It's like what happened with Alvin. That guy could well be Anthony Miller. They've spent a lot of time with Miller. I got a lot of respect for Anthony because, he's a walk-on football player, and, he had to earn his way. And the last 2 years, he's been dominating. And when you play Memphis, listen, it don't take a rocket scientist to figure out, I got to cover Anthony Miller some kind of way. And yet he got open time after time after time. And he was great in the red zone for a smaller receiver. He's not a real big guy, but, boy, he is so smooth. And he can go up and get the football. And I do know that they have done a lot of work on Anthony. What happens if this is a similar scenario where he lasts a little bit longer than you might think? Would you consider, because the time is ticking away, to say, you know what, let's try to do the same deal like we did a year ago. Let's give up our second-round pick and an extra pick. We got a couple extra picks later in the draft. We'll move up late in round 2 or in round 3, and we get Miller. He's a guy that's spent a lot of time on. Now, again, it has to break just right for you, just like with Alvin. But, when the season ended before he had the foot injury, I think everybody was looking at him. He's a top 35 pick. He's either going to go in round 1 or early part of round 2. Similar to what? Alvin Kamara. And so I could see that scenario happening with Anthony also, that he starts to last a little bit longer than you might think, and you make that move for him, and he gives you another playmaker at wide receiver. And you hope that Cameron Meredith can come back. And, that's an 18-month injury to fully get back. You can come back in a year, but you're not going to really be 100% till 2019. You've got a young guy who knows how to run routes, is competitive, and he is a go-out, make-play type person. I'm just telling you, that name, Anthony Miller.
Yeah, I like it. Thanks. I really do like it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely, Mike. Anthony Miller was a strong topic of our conversation before you jumped on. All three of us like him a lot. So you think there's a good possibility that he would be there in the third round?
No. I don't think. Well, for the Saints pick, there's no way. But what I could see happening is something similar to Kamara, in that, because of events and circumstances, he lasts deep into round 2, or maybe he's there very early in round 3. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to have teams starting to try to move some pieces to get him. That's where maybe Sean will say, you know what, let's find us a team like we did last year, and let's try to, let's give him a second round pick next year, and we got multiple picks in this draft late, and see if we can't go out and get an Anthony Miller, who can come in here, and it won't take him long to learn the system. That's all I can tell you. The Memphis coaches love him because of his toughness. Now, that might seem crazy for a receiver, but if you saw some of the contested catches that he made, it was impressive, because now you've got coverage rotated to your side of the field. You're not just beating one guy. You've got a couple guys around you, and he'd come up with those catches. What's even more impressive is to watch his plays in the red zone, where the field's condensed, rotation to his side, and he finds a little crack to get open. And Riley pangs him. Pow! With the throw, and he gets in. Now, because of the foot injury, he didn't do all the off-season stuff that could have maybe solidified his spot as a late first, early second. So now he's tumbling, for no fault of his own, but he's starting to take a tumble, because you know why? DJ Chalk did. DJ Chalk won the off-season. Now, he played well as a senior, but he also won the off-season. And DJ's muscled in there. And I think people realize the quarterback play what it was at LSU. And DJ Moore, I think when he came out, most people thought, it's probably a second-round pick. If you watch Maryland play, if you think DJ Chalk had quarterback troubles, watch Maryland. And that ball's all over the place. Yeah, for DJ Moore to catch the passes he got, God bless him. Because the balls were high, wide. He was pulling it out of the dirt. You got a lot of respect for that type player. He didn't complain. He didn't scream up the rooftops about it. But the ball was really not ever centered on him. It was all over the place, and he was having to get up to make a play, catching balls outside of his body radius, or digging it out of the dirt like a shortstop to make that play. And I think people got impressed with that. When you watched him on film and saw, man, that's impressive. And so where's Anthony Miller in this? He's getting pushed aside. Same thing with Brown from Notre Dame on the hoof. Man, there aren't a lot of guys built like him. And the genetics is that was a two-time Mr. Olympia. You look at a 6'5" receiver who has a sophomore was really good. This quarterback play was nothing to write home about either. But even at times last year, you could see he was sort of lackadaisical in his routes. I just keep thinking, that ball ain't coming near me. And he's another guy. He won the offseason. He did everything right in the offseason to run his jump. He's very well versed, a very sharp young man. And so Anthony's pushed aside. Just kicked back. Same as Kareem Hunt. The same as Kamara. They get kicked back a little bit. And that's happening to Anthony Miller right now in Memphis.
You got any predictions for us? I know a lot of Saints fans are tuning in, and we all have our opinion on what New Orleans is going to do with the first-round pick. Do they trade up? Do they trade back? Who do they draft if they sit at 27? Do you got any last-minute changes of heart, or where you think that they're going to go without necessarily revealing any insider information to betray team officials?
Oh, no, listen, I'm in enough trouble now, so it really wouldn't matter one way or another. But here's my thing. If they trade up in the draft, it's for one of two players. It's either for Landry or Taven Bryan. And I think worst-case scenario for them, they see Atlanta picking right ahead of them, and that I think they've done a lot of work on Taven. So I can see them try to move up to get a Landry or a Bryant if it's not a hard move to do so. If they stay at 27, the value there is interior players, center guard, cornerback. That's where your value is going to be. Unless somebody out of the blue sort of tumbles, which happens every year. None of this ramsack would last to 32. and yet he did. I thought he'd be an early 20s pick. I thought he'd be the first tackle off the board. What did Derek Bowles do at Denver? I mean, so again, sometimes you fall in love with the athleticism and you forget about something Jim Pace told me years ago. Mike, always remember one thing. Ask yourself this question: can he play? All this stuff in the Olympics is great, but can he play? And sometimes that's you wonder what people are seeing to grade some of the players that they grade out at. So I think if it's a trade-up, it's definitely for a front defensive line player, and it would either be Landry or Bryan. If they stay put, I think where you're going to have value is in the interior offensive line, a James Daniels, a Will Hernandez, possibly even an Isaiah Wynn, who could play center if needed. And he's played tackle, he's played guard. And I think he could play center because he told me it wouldn't be much for me to play center. I could do it. Or at cornerback, we've named off those guys as Josh and Mike Hughes and Isaiah Oliver. I just don't think that Jari has made that little move in round one where he's going to go a little bit higher than I thought he would. So you've got some options here, but just remember who's the head coach and what he's done in the past. When he wanted Cedric Ellis, he traded up in round one to get him. When he wanted Mark Ingram, he traded up in round one to get him. When he wanted Brandon Cooks, he traded up in round one to get him. When he wanted Alvin Kamara, he traded up into the third round to get him. He's never been shy about telling you and kind of sticking his chest out about, hey, I'm going to do it. If I want a certain player, I'm going to do what I got to do to get him. And the reality, you got a 39-year-old quarterback. And if we're going to do it with Drew Brees, you're going to do it in the next year or two.
No chance of trading back whatsoever, you don't think?
It's not been, because I do think history does repeat itself. They have never traded out of round one back. They did in round two, year one. And actually, we had had lunch with Mickey Loomis. And Mickey had talked about the possibility that maybe we can get a veteran center. And it sort of intrigued me that he brought up the center position. And sure enough, in round two, they traded back. They got Jeff Fain and Roman Harper in the trade back for DeQuell Jackson from Cleveland wanted. So it's not been part of their history to do it. But you look over the last 6 years, 5 of those years, a pick 25 to 30 has been traded back. So that there is some history there. But this team hasn't done it in round one. They did it in round two in year one, but it's not been something. I know Mickey says this all the time. Everybody wants to trade back, but it's to find your partner. It's to find your guy. It's to find your team that wants to do it. Is this year the year that maybe you find that partner? You got to have a dance partner to make a trade. You got to find somebody else. And like you said, it's easy to project it and say, well, let's trade back and let's get an extra pick. But like you said, it takes a team to say, we're going to give you the third round pick and a second to move up 5 spots or 6 spots. How many teams are willing to do that? Not a lot today, because I do think when you can hit in the draft, it's football minimum wage. And you want to try to keep as many of those early picks as you can. So I do think there'll be a lot of trades tomorrow. I think you'll see some shuffling in round one. What I'm interested to see if that shuffle happens late in round one, and if the Saints would be involved, because their history has not been to trade back.
Very true. Guys, do we have anything else for Mike?
No, Mike, thank you so much. Been very in-depth and great as usual.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and Mr. Mike, I once again, I just appreciate you coming on. This has become a yearly tradition for you to appear with us and I can't thank you enough. And of course, Bob's taking over as the host this year because Kyle's going to go into quote unquote retirement as a host. So Bob's taking over.
Man,
but
you're too young to be retired, Kyle. Man, come on, you can't retire. Come on, man.
Look, hey, Mike,
you didn't win the Powerball lottery and then tell nobody, did you?
Look, if I did, I wouldn't. If I did, I would have given these guys the keys, and you would not be hearing my voice at all.
Hey, I understand where you're coming from.
Look, Mike, you're going to hear me, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have some great shows. But I love giving guys the opportunity to showcase their talents, and Bob and Barry are two guys that I really appreciate what they do, and I think they're going to be great.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well,
awesome.
Thank you, and thank you
so
Mike,
much
for coming on with us. I've followed your work for a long time. It's truly an honor to pick your brain, not only about the New Orleans Saints, but about the fine work you do throughout the NFL. Believe me, fans like myself really appreciate it. I mean, we can't do enough to show our appreciation to you. But thank you so much for coming on with us tonight.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, guys. Y'all take care. I love you.
All right. That was great, man.
Yeah, it really was.
Do you guys realize he just talked nonstop, not even pausing to take a breath for about an hour and 15 minutes. He's just the most phenomenal analyst there is in the sport of football, college, pro, high school. He covers it all, and he's just the most knowledgeable, and just the stories are wonderful. And I personally have been following Mike since the first time he appeared on WWL New Orleans back in, I think, 1982. With the late great Hack Galati.
Yeah.
And of course, he was appearing with Buddy Diliberto. And like I said, that's 30, well, he's been doing it full time for, he said 33 years, but he's actually been appearing on WWL New Orleans now for 36, I think it is.
Wow.
And I'm showing my age as well.
Wow.
I'm showing my age as well because I was in high school. I was a high school journalism student when I first heard Mike Detillier. So that's how old I am. But he's just phenomenal, and we appreciate him coming on every year at this time. So
definitely.
Yeah, and not only that, folks, if you follow him on Twitter, you know that he does show after show after show like this. I mean, he bounces from one show to another, and the man. I wish I could bottle the energy. And we were really lucky that he took some time out to join us tonight. And if you don't follow Mike Detillier on Twitter, please do yourself a favor and do so. And subscribe to his draft guide. There is no more comprehensive work in the business. I can promise you that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Look, guys, it's been a great night, great evening. Look, Saints fans, don't forget, you can follow us at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com, or you can go to @SaintsNews on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, Facebook, whatever, and that's where we are. But also, don't forget, if you have an Alexa, Echo, or whatever, you can always listen to us on TuneIn, or just say, what's her name, Alexa, Saints News, and play Saints News, and we are on there as well. So, we're going to have some great coverage of the draft, and we're going to have probably follow-up with these guys, Bob and Barry. I know you guys are going to give your opinions online as well. Barry, tell everybody how you can be followed.
You can follow me on Twitter at Barry Hurstis, HIRSTIUS. At Barry Hurstis, or you can just go to saintsnewsnetwork.com. I took the day off today because I had some personal stuff to take care of, but I usually have an article out every day, and as soon as we get it fully staffed, because we're still technically building the website. I mean, we just we've always had the radio podcast network, but we just started putting out articles as a website last year, so we still technically building the site, but I've pretty much got it to where it should be. I'm hopefully about to add another writer here soon, but I put out fresh content daily, and I guarantee you this show that you just listened to right now, I will be putting out an article in the morning that will have Taven Bryan and Harold Landry and some of the names that Mike mentioned that maybe I personally haven't covered, like a Taven Bryan. As you heard him say, don't be surprised if the Saints do a trade up. We've discussed Harold Landry at length, but there's another name to remember now, Taven Bryan, because he might be the best of all the interior players. Taven Bryan might be the best pass rusher. And you heard Sean Payton say they're looking for a pressure player. Doesn't necessarily have to be a defensive end off the edge. That could be an interior guy rushing the quarterback right up the middle. And Taven Bryan, there's a name to remember. So I guarantee you that'll be in my article in the morning.
Awesome. All right.
And
Bob.
also, don't forget Bob Rose mock draft for Canal Street Chronicles.
That's right.
I don't know, man. After listening to Mike, I think I might have to tear up my mock draft.
There you go. There you go.
Look, man, Bob, I'm ready for it, man. You got to bring it. You got to bring it. Bring it strong. Look, guys, it's been a great evening. I'm an old man, so I have to go take my Geritol. But
same here.
It's been great, Bob. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, guys, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate you, Kyle, and you, Barry, for helping me along. And I really liked our content tonight. But like you guys, I'm tired. The next 3 days are going to be extremely exciting. And like you guys said, expect all of us to have our reactions online and articles, and then we're going to do a follow-up draft show next Wednesday with the Bayou Blitz. So keep us right at your fingertips. And thank you guys so much again. Thank you to Mr. Mike Detillier for joining us. We appreciate your draft content. We really do. Looking forward to having you on the show again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Mike has always been a friend to the Saints News Network, and thank you very much, Mike. And again, guys, pray for Coach Rick Gailey. He's going through, I think, his 12th or 13th round of chemo, so just be with him in his prayers as well as his family. This is Kyle T. Mosley with Mr. Bob Rose, our host, and the phenomenal, my man from Harahan, Mr. Barry Hurstis. Y'all have a good draft. Saints fans, who dat, baby?
Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.